For years, I carried a weight so heavy that it stole my sleep, haunted my thoughts, and poisoned every smile I tried to give. At 52, I could no longer bear the silence. My children had grown, my hair had grayed, and my soul demanded release. That night, I sat them down, looked into their eyes, and revealed the secret I had hidden for decades. Stay with me, because this shocking revelation will leave you speechless. I wasn't afraid of death. I wasn't afraid of judgment. I was afraid of leaving this world with the truth buried inside me, condemned to rot in silence. For decades, I believed I was protecting them by hiding the truth. But in reality, I was only protecting myself from their pain. And what I told them that night would break their hearts before it healed them. The living room was quiet, the clock ticking louder than ever. My eldest son frowned, sensing the seriousness of my voice. My daughter clutched her hands, nervous. My youngest tried to smile, but the weight in the air silenced even him. And what I confessed first would shake the foundation of everything they believed. The burden of silence for decades. I carried the guilt of a choice I made long before my children were born. That choice shaped our lives, though they never knew it. And the truth of that choice was darker than they could imagine. I began slowly, telling them about a love I once had before meeting their mother, a woman whose name I had erased from every story, every photograph, every memory I shared. But the truth I hid about her would shock them to their core. Their eyes widened, their breath quickened. But I continued, "Before I married your mother, I fathered a child with another woman." Gasps filled the room. My daughter covered her mouth. My sons exchanged glances of disbelief. And what I revealed next made their hearts race even faster. I confessed that the child was born, but I abandoned him out of fear, pride, and weakness. I ran from responsibility, pretending that chapter of my life never existed. And admitting those words out loud tore open wounds I thought had scarred over. Tears filled my eyes as I told them, "You have a brother you have never met." And I have lived 52 years with the shame of my betrayal. But what I told them after shattered their anger and turned it into silence. The shocking revelation, my eldest son stood up, his voice trembling. "Why now, Father? Why, after all these years?" I looked at him with heavy eyes and said, "Because secrets rot the soul. And I refuse to die with this weight." And those words silenced him completely. I explained that the boy, their half-brother, had grown up without my guidance, without my name, without my love. I had chosen cowardice over courage, and that decision haunted me every single day. But what I revealed next would leave them speechless. I told them I had seen him once, sat a distance. He didn't recognize me, but I knew instantly he was mine. He had my eyes, my hands, my walk. But I turned away, too ashamed to approach. And the pain of that memory drew tears from my children's eyes. My daughter whispered, "Does he know about us?" I shook my head. No, to him, I am just a shadow that disappeared before he could remember. And what she said next pierced me deeper than any blade. She looked at me, her voice breaking. "Then we must find him," and that single sentence became the beginning of a forgiveness journey I never expected. The search, the following weeks, turned into an emotional drama. My children, once angry and disappointed, began searching for their lost brother. They scoured records, asked questions, followed every lead. And what they discovered brought us closer to the truth uncovered. One day, my youngest son returned with a photograph. My lost child, now a grown man, standing with his family. My heart stopped. The years had aged him, but his eyes mirrored mine. And that photograph became the most shocking emotional moment of my life. My children gathered around me, holding the picture. "Father, we found him," they said. My body shook. My voice cracked, and I whispered, "Then it is time." And what we did next changed the destiny of our family forever. The first step, the day came when I could no longer hide behind silence. My children stood beside me, holding the photograph of the man who carried my blood, but not my name. And what I told them before we left stunned them even more. I said, "If he rejects me, I will accept it. But I cannot leave this world without at least asking for forgiveness." And those words set the tone for everything that followed. We drove for hours, my hands trembling the whole way. My daughter whispered, "Father, breathe. No matter what happens, you are not alone anymore." And her words gave me strength to face the unknown. As we approached his house, my heart pounded louder than the tires on the road. My eldest son looked at me and asked, "Are you ready?" I closed my eyes and nodded. And what happened when he opened the door left me speechless. There he was, taller than I imagined, his face hardened by life, his eyes piercing like mirrors of my own youth. For a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. And then he asked a question that shook my soul. "Who are you?" His voice was cold, suspicious. My children looked at me, waiting for my answer. I swallowed hard and said, "I am your father." And his reaction broke my heart. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "I don't have a father. I grew up without one." His words were daggers, but I stood firm. And what I told him next softened his anger. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I ask for it anyway. I abandoned you out of fear. But today, I stand here ready to face the truth." And the silence that followed carried the weight of decades. The storm of emotions, my lost son's face twisted with pain. "Do you know how many nights I cried, asking why my father never came?" His voice shook, but anger carried it like thunder. And his words tore my heart open again. My daughter stepped forward, tears in her eyes, and said, "We are your siblings. We just found out about you. Please, let us in." And her voice cracked the wall he had built for years. He looked at each of them, his anger fighting against curiosity. Finally, he said, "Why now? Why after all this time?" I whispered, "Because truth uncovered is better than a lifetime of lies." And those words pierced the silence like lightning. He invited us inside reluctantly. The living room was simple, filled with photographs of his wife and children. I stared at the faces of my grandchildren I had never known, and the sight of them nearly brought me to my knees. My lost son noticed my tears and said, "You don't get to cry. You left me." His voice was sharp, but beneath it, I could hear the little boy still crying inside. And my response changed everything. "I left you, but I never stopped carrying you in my soul." Every day, I lived with the weight of that betrayal. "Forgive me, not for me, but for you, so you can be free from my mistake." And those words began to melt the ice around his heart. The first embrace silence filled the room again. My children sat quietly, watching, their breaths held, waiting for his decision. Then, slowly, he walked toward me. And what he did next made my knees tremble. He extended his arms, hesitating for a moment, then pulled me into an embrace. It was not warm, not yet, but it was real. His body shook against mine. And that first embrace became the most powerful emotional moment of my life. Tears fell freely as I held him, whispering, "I am sorry. I am so sorry." He didn't answer, but he didn't let go either. And that silence spoke louder than words. My daughter approached and wrapped her arms around us. Then my eldest son joined, followed by my youngest. For the first time, all my children stood together, and that image will forever remain engraved in my heart. He finally spoke, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I will try. and those words opened the door to reconciliation. I nodded, tears still streaming. That is all I ask. Try, because forgiveness is a journey, not a single step. And in that moment, hope was born again. The dinner of truth that night, we gathered round his table for dinner, the first time our entire family sat together under one roof. The air was heavy with unspoken words, but the food on the table reminded us that sharing a meal could heal wounds, and what was said during that dinner would change everything. My lost son sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed, still guarded. My other children tried to break the ice with small talk, but the tension was impossible to ignore. And then he asked a question that silenced everyone. "Do you regret it?" His voice was low, but it struck like a hammer. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Every day of my life." And those words unlocked emotions I had buried for decades. Tears welled in his eyes as he pushed his plate away. "Then why didn't you come back? Why didn't you try?" I swallowed hard and admitted, because shame is a prison, and I was too weak to break free, and my honesty cut through the bitterness in his heart. My daughter reached across the table, holding her brother's hand. "You deserved a father, and we deserved a brother, but maybe this dinner is our chance to rewrite the story." And her words planted the first seed of reconciliation. The shocking confession, as the night deepened, I felt there was still one truth left unsaid, a truth even more painful than the first. My chest tightened as I realized I had to confess it now or never, and what I confessed shocked them all to the core. "I didn't just leave you," I whispered, "I also lied to your mother. She never knew the full truth. I told her you were gone, that there was nothing left between us." And gasps filled the room like thunder. My children stared at me in disbelief. My eldest slammed his fist on the table. "So not only did you abandon him, you betrayed her too." My head hung low. Yes, I was a coward in every way. And their anger burned hotter than ever. My lost son stood up, shaking. "You let me grow up fatherless and made her live in ignorance." His voice cracked with fury. I nodded, unable to defend myself. And the storm in his eyes threatened to tear us apart again. But then my daughter spoke softly. "Secrets poison generations. But tonight the poison ends here." And her courage steadied the storm that nearly consumed us all. The path to forgiveness, the days that followed, were not easy. My lost son avoided my calls, his anger still raw, but my other children refused to give up. "He needs time," they told me, and their patience became the bridge I desperately needed. Weeks later, he finally called. His voice was hesitant, but softer. "If you're serious about change, prove it." I asked how. He said, "Be present. Not just for me, but for my children too." And his demand became my greatest challenge. I began visiting his home regularly, not to preach, but to listen. I played with his kids, told them stories, and let them know I was there. And little by little, trust began to bloom. One evening, he finally said, "I still don't know if I can forgive you, but I see you're trying." Tears filled my eyes. Trying is all I can do until the day I die. And that became the first step in our forgiveness journey. At last, we stood side by side, watching our children play together, the siblings they never knew they had. For the first time, I felt a glimpse of peace. And that peace was the answer I had waited for my entire life. The generational conflict. One evening, while we all gathered again, my lost son asked the question that had lingered unspoken. "Did Grandma know?" The room went silent, everyone waiting for my answer. And my response opened another wound, long hidden. I admitted that my mother, his grandmother, knew the truth, but had begged me never to speak of it. "She feared it would destroy the family," I whispered, And those words revealed just how deep the family secrets had run. My eldest son clenched his fists. So this curse of silence didn't start with you, it's been passed down. His voice carried both anger and realization, and the truth struck like lightning through the generations. I nodded. Our family was built on appearances, not truth. And I carried that poison into your lives. And their eyes filled with the heavy pain of generational conflict. My daughter leaned forward. But we can end it here. If we commit to truth, our children won't inherit this curse. And her determination lit a spark of hope in us all. The healing wounds, the following weeks, became a journey of healing. I wrote letters to each of my children, including the son I had abandoned. In them, I confessed every detail, every failure, every regret. And those letters became the key to reopening old wounds, so they could finally heal. My lost son read his letter in silence, tears dripping onto the paper. "At least now you're not hiding anymore," he said, and his words carried the first fragile thread of reconciliation. My daughter organized a family gathering at our old home. It was the first time we all stood under the same roof, with honesty as our foundation. And what happened at that gathering shocked everyone present. My lost son stood in the center and said, "I am not ready to forgive, but I am ready to stop hating." The room froze, then erupted in tears and embraces. And that declaration became the turning point of our forgiveness journey. We sat together until midnight, telling stories, laughing through tears, and building bridges where walls had once stood. And that night proved that even broken families can heal. The last birthday wish, as my 53rd birthday approached, I decided I didn't want gifts, parties, or speeches. I wanted only one thing: for all my children to be together, united, under one roof again. And that simple wish carried more power than any present. They gathered around me, each bringing dishes, laughter, and even awkward smiles. My lost son stood apart at first, but slowly he joined the circle. And when he did, the energy in the room shifted forever. Before blowing out the candles, I raised my glass and said, "My last birthday wish is not for me, it's for all of you. Promise me that truth and dignity will guide you always." And their response left me speechless. They raised their glasses in unison and said, "We promise." In that moment, the weight of decades lifted from my shoulders, and that promise became my eternal legacy. As I closed my eyes and blew out the candles, I knew that the secret which once destroyed us had now become the force that bound us together. And that transformation was the greatest gift of all. The test of time. Months passed, and reconciliation was no longer just words, but daily choices. My lost son visited more often, though hesitation still lingered in his eyes, and what he said one evening revealed the depth of his struggle. He looked at me and asked, "How do I erase a lifetime of absence with a few months of presence?" I took his hand and said, "You don't erase it, to build something new on top of it." And that answer gave him something he had been waiting for. Hope. My grandchildren began to call me Grandpa. Without hesitation, their laughter filled the house, stitching together the broken pieces of my soul. And their innocence reminded us all that healing begins with the young. Still, there were setbacks. Some days he pulled away, his anger resurfacing. Other days he embraced me fully. Forgiveness was not a straight path, it was a stormy road, and every step forward felt like a miracle in itself. One night, I told him, forgiveness is not forgetting, it's choosing to remember without hate. He nodded silently, tears in his eyes, and that truth became the foundation of our fragile peace. The legacy of truth. As the years turned, my children grew closer than ever. Family dinners became sacred, filled with truth instead of silence. The ghosts of betrayal still lingered, but they no longer haunted us. And that change was the proof that truth heals more than it hurts. At one gathering, my daughter said, "Father, you've turned your greatest mistake into your greatest teaching." Her words struck me like lightning. And in that moment, I realized my pain had become their lesson. I began writing my story down not to seek pity, but to leave behind a record of truth, forgiveness, and dignity. And that book would later inspire more than just my family. Neighbors heard of our reconciliation and came to listen. Some admitted they too had buried secrets for decades. My story gave them courage, and I realized my confession had the power to heal beyond my own walls. I told my children, our legacy will not be wealth or property, it will be the truth we dared to tell. And they embraced those words as the inheritance they would pass down. The eternal reunion on my 55th birthday, we gathered again, this time, not as strangers, not as divided branches, but as one family tree, finally whole. And that day became the true celebration of my life. My lost son stood beside me, no longer distant, no longer broken. He lifted his glass and said, "For years I lived without a father, but today I finally feel like a son." And his words became the closure I had prayed for all along. Tears filled every eye around the table. My grandchildren hugged me tightly, chanting "Grandpa," as if they had known me their whole lives. And in their voices, I found redemption. I looked at all of them and said, "My journey was full of mistakes, but love has the last word." Silence filled the room, but it was a silence of peace. And in that silence, we all felt the weight of healing. From that day forward, our family lived not as victims of a secret, but as survivors of it. And my story, once a source of shame, became the legacy of truth and reconciliation. And that legacy will live long after I am gone.